While looking through my 9-year-old school reading journal so I could sign it, I found that someone who wasn't me had already signed off as Dad. The night before I left for a 2-week work trip, I was emptying Finn's backpack when I found his school reading log tucked between his spelling test and a half-eaten granola bar. His special ed class required parents to sign off on 20 minutes of reading each night, and I always made sure to do it before my business trips. But looking at the log, I noticed 2 completely different daddy signatures alternating between the past few months. One was clearly my son's attempt at copying my handwriting, which I expected, but the other handwriting was different, masculine, and definitely not my wife Chloe's. Even worse, on the dates I was traveling, Finn had written little notes like, "Other daddy read all the voices," and "Uncle helped me understand the story better." My chest tightened, but I tried to stay rational. Chloe probably just had a friend or neighbor help out when I was gone. But then I saw the note that made my stomach drop. "Other daddy is really good at reading. He makes it fun like a game." The next morning, Wednesday, Finn's teacher, Mrs. Biles, called me. "I wanted to personally congratulate you for the improvement in Finn's reading. Whatever you and your wife have been doing these past 6 months has really made a difference." "Thank you," I managed, though my mouth felt dry. Finn has been so excited during sharing time, telling the class about his Uncle Tommy who visits and helps with homework. He even drew a picture of him for our People Who Help Us Learn bulletin board. My stomach dropped. Uncle Tommy. Chloe's brother was named Timothy, but he was still in prison. At least that's what she told me. "He drew a picture?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes. It shows Tommy sitting in what Finn calls the special reading corner in your basement. Finn mentioned Tommy brings him treats and knows all the best books." I called my boss and told him I couldn't go on the trip, my mind spinning between rage and confusion. Was Chloe having an affair, or bringing her convict brother around our child? When Finn came home, he practically squealed when he saw me still home. He jumped in my arms and we hugged super tight. We made ice cream, and while eating our sundaes, I casually brought it up. "Hey, buddy, can you tell me about these signatures in your reading log?" I pointed to them. Finn looked up with those trusting green eyes. "That's Uncle Tommy," he said brightly. "He comes over when you fly to other cities for work. We play games together." My eyes widened slightly. "Who is Uncle Tommy?" I asked. Finn suddenly looked down at the floor. "Promise not to tell Mommy if I tell you?" I gave him our sacred pinky promise. I watched Finn's face go from almost scared to tearful to brave in a matter of seconds before he finally spoke. "Please don't tell Mom. But Uncle Tommy, he's Mom's big brother." My blood instantly turned to ice. Chloe's big brother. The same man who was supposed to be serving 8 years. The same man who'd been convicted of inappropriate conduct with an 11-year-old girl. "Finn," I said, fighting to keep my voice from shaking, "can you show me this special reading corner Uncle Tommy set up?" "Sure." Finn jumped up excitedly and led me to the basement stairs. He made it really cool with beanbags and everything. He brings new books every time, and there's a candy bowl that only he's allowed to put candy in. The basement had been transformed. A corner I hadn't visited in years was now set up with colorful beanbags and shelves of new children's books. A convicted offender had been down here with my son, alone, while I was traveling for work. "Is Uncle Tommy coming soon?" I asked, though I could barely get the words out. "He's supposed to be coming today after you left for your Denver trip." That's when the front door opened upstairs. "Finn, I'm home!" Chloe's voice called out cheerfully. "We're in the basement," I called back, my voice sounding strange even to me. I heard her footsteps stop at the top of the stairs. Then slowly, she came down. The moment she saw me standing in the reading corner, holding the journal with the signature, her face went white. "Dave, I can explain," she started. "Finn, go upstairs and play in your room," I said quietly. Finn looked between us, sensing the tension. "Is everything okay?" "Go upstairs, buddy. Mom and I need to talk." After Finn left, Chloe stood frozen on the bottom step, her hands gripping the railing. "Why is your pedo brother hanging out with my child?" Her legs seemed to give out, and she sat down on the step. "He got out early. Good behavior. He completed programs. The parole board said he was rehabilitated." "You promised me you'd never let him near our boy again," I told her. "He's changed!" She burst out, tears streaming down her face. "He made one terrible mistake, but he's in therapy, on medication. He should be allowed supervised visits. He would never hurt Finn." "Supervised visits," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "Is that what you call the basement corner with the white unknown candy? Supervision?" She buried her face in her hands. "He's my brother. He lost everything. Even his kids won't see him. I wanted to help him, and Finn was struggling with reading, and you're gone so much. So you used my travel schedule to sneak that predator in?" My rage was interrupted by the doorbell. Timothy was here. The doorbell rang again, and I stood there frozen for maybe 2 seconds before my hand went straight to my phone. I dialed 911 while Chloe started crying harder on the basement steps, her whole body shaking as she realized what I was doing. The operator answered, and I told her there was a registered sex offender at my door who'd been secretly accessing my 6-year-old son. I gave our address and said we needed police immediately, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. Chloe jumped up and tried to grab my phone, but I pushed past her and headed up the basement stairs, keeping the operator on the line. She followed me up, grabbing at my shirt and begging me to hang up, saying I was overreacting and Timothy would never hurt anyone. I ignored her and went straight to Finn's room where I found him on the floor with his Legos, completely unaware of what was happening downstairs. He looked up and smiled at me, asking if Uncle Tommy was here yet because he heard the doorbell. I told him to keep playing and closed his door, then went to the front window to look outside. Timothy was walking back to his car, a beat-up Honda Civic, looking confused and checking his phone. He was bigger than I remembered from the photos years ago, maybe 6 feet tall with dark hair and a beard. He leaned against his car and started texting, probably asking Chloe why nobody was answering the door. 2 police cars pulled up just as he was opening his driver's door to leave, their lights flashing but no sirens. They blocked him in perfectly, one behind his car and one in front, and I watched him freeze with his hand still on the door handle. The officers got out slowly and approached Timothy's car while I went outside to meet them, still holding my phone with the 911 operator listening. Timothy's face went white when he saw me coming down the driveway with the cops walking toward him. I explained to the first officer that this man was a convicted sex offender who'd been having secret unsupervised contact with my son for months. I showed him the reading log with the forged signatures and pointed to the basement window where the reading corner was set up. The officer asked Timothy for his ID while his partner ran his plates and confirmed his sex offender status on their computer. Timothy kept saying Chloe invited him and that everything was supervised, but I told them about the candy bowl and the secret visits during my business trips. They put Timothy in the back of the first police car for questioning, while the second officer came inside to take our statements. Chloe was sitting on the couch crying when we came in, and she immediately started telling the officer that Timothy was rehabilitated and she never left them alone together. The officer took notes and asked about the basement setup, so I showed him the reading corner with all the new books and beanbags. He took photos of everything, including the candy bowl that Finn said only Uncle Tommy could touch, which made him raise his eyebrows. After the officers left with Timothy, I called Nathan Medina, a family lawyer my colleague had used during his custody battle. Nathan answered even though it was almost 7 at night, and I explained everything that had just happened with Timothy and the police. He told me to document absolutely everything immediately, take photos of the basement, save all text messages, and write down everything Finn had told me. He said he could see me first thing tomorrow morning at 8:30, and that I should not let Finn out of my sight until then. That night, I grabbed a blanket and pillow and set up camp on Finn's bedroom floor after locking his door from the inside. Chloe pounded on the door for almost an hour, crying and apologizing and saying she just wanted to talk. She kept saying she was sorry and that she never meant for this to happen, that Timothy promised he was better. I didn't answer her and just lay there on the hard floor listening to Finn's breathing and watching the door handle jiggle as she tried to get in. Around midnight, she finally gave up, and I heard her bedroom door close, but I still couldn't sleep. Every little noise made me jump, thinking maybe Timothy had been given bail, or maybe Chloe had another key to Finn's room. The next morning, I woke Finn up early and got him dressed for school while Chloe was still in her room. He asked why I slept on his floor, and I told him I just wanted to be close to him, which made him smile and hug me. I made him breakfast and packed his lunch, then drove him to the school 20 minutes early so I could talk to Mrs. Biles and the principal. Mrs. Biles was setting up her classroom when we arrived, and her face showed concern when she saw my expression. I asked if we could speak privately, and she took us to the principal's office where I explained what had happened with Timothy. The principal immediately pulled up Finn's file on her computer and updated the pickup list to exclude Timothy completely. She also added a bright red flag to his file that would alert any substitute teacher or staff member about the situation. Mrs. Biles put her hand over her mouth when I told her about the candy bowl and the months of secret visits. She said she'd keep an extra close eye on Finn and document any behavioral changes or things he might say about the situation. After dropping Finn off, I drove straight to Nathan's office in downtown, a tall building with marble floors and serious-looking people in suits. Nathan was maybe 50 with gray hair and glasses, and his office walls were covered with law degrees and family photos. He had me start from the beginning and took notes on everything, asking specific questions about dates and times and who knew what when. He explained our options, including filing for an emergency protective order and getting temporary sole custody while the investigation was ongoing. He said CPS would definitely get involved once the police report was filed and that I should cooperate fully with their investigation. He started preparing paperwork while I sat there trying to process that my marriage was probably over, that my wife had chosen her predator brother over our son's safety. Nathan said he'd file the emergency motion that afternoon, and we'd likely have a hearing within the next few days. He gave me his cell number and said to call immediately if Chloe tried to take Finn anywhere or if Timothy showed up again. That afternoon around 3, just after I'd picked Finn up from the school, a woman named Valerie Armstrong from CPS knocked on our door. She had short brown hair and a kind face but serious eyes, carrying a tablet and a folder full of forms. She explained she was there for an emergency assessment based on the police report from yesterday and needed to interview everyone separately. She talked to me first in the kitchen while Chloe stayed in the living room and Finn played in his room. I showed her everything, including the reading log, the basement corner, and the photos I'd taken of the candy bowl and new books. She asked detailed questions about our schedules, when I traveled, how long the visits had been happening, and what exactly Finn had told me. Then she interviewed Chloe separately while I waited upstairs with Finn, and I could hear Chloe crying again downstairs. Valerie spent almost an hour in the basement taking photos and measurements, documenting everything about the reading corner setup. She asked to see Finn's room and looked at his toys and books, making notes about anything that might have been gifts from Timothy. The next day, Valerie went to Finn's school to interview him with the school counselor present, using special techniques for talking to young children about difficult topics. The next morning, my phone rang while I was making Finn breakfast, and the caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Craig Stevenson introduced himself as Timothy's parole officer and said he'd gotten the police report from yesterday. He confirmed Timothy had violated at least 3 major parole conditions by having unsupervised contact with a minor. He also violated the requirement to disclose his whereabouts during all visits. Craig said he was filing an immediate violation report that would go before the parole board next week. After hanging up, I called a locksmith and a security company, paying triple for same-day service on everything. The locksmith arrived first and changed every lock on our doors while I watched him work. The security guys came 2 hours later with cameras and motion sensors for every entrance. Chloe sat on the couch the whole time, not saying anything but tears running down her face constantly. She knew what these changes meant for our family and didn't even try to protest anymore. Nathan called that afternoon to say he'd filed the emergency motion for a protective order against Timothy. The hearing was scheduled for next Tuesday, and he warned me to prepare for a fight. He said Chloe might take Timothy's side in court, which could complicate things significantly. I needed to document everything and be ready to testify about what I'd discovered. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was Travis, my boss, calling about missing another day of work. I explained the situation with my son and why I couldn't travel to Denver or anywhere else right now. He was understanding but said this would definitely affect my performance review coming up next month. The promotion I'd been working toward for 2 years was probably gone now too. That evening, while Finn played video games upstairs, Chloe finally broke down and told me everything. She admitted Timothy had been visiting for 4 months, starting back in January when I went to Seattle. At first she stayed in the room with them, but after a few weeks she started leaving them alone. She genuinely believed he was reformed and would never hurt Finn, especially since he'd completed all those prison programs. The next day, while Chloe was in the shower, I searched through her purse looking for anything else she might be hiding. I found receipts from a bookstore and a candy shop, all paid in cash and dated over the past 4 months. Timothy had been buying all those books and treats with cash to avoid leaving any credit card trail. The premeditation of it made me run to the bathroom where I threw up my morning coffee. Nathan recommended a child therapist named Annika Flores, who specialized in trauma and inappropriate adult contact cases. She came to the house 3 days later to meet with Finn for an initial assessment. After spending 2 hours with him, she told me Finn showed no signs of physical abuse, which was a relief. But she was concerned about his confusion regarding boundaries and keeping secrets from parents. She said Timothy had definitely been grooming him with the special friend talk and secret keeping. She wanted to see Finn twice a week to work through these issues before they became bigger problems. Craig called again that Friday to update me on Timothy's situation after his arrest. Timothy had posted bail using money from his parents, but was immediately fitted with an ankle monitor. He was banned from coming within a mile of our neighborhood or Finn's school. Craig said Timothy was staying with distant relatives 2 towns over while awaiting his parole violation hearing. The judge would decide whether to send him back to prison to finish his original sentence. That night, I moved my stuff into the guest room and installed a lock on the door from the inside. I couldn't share a bed with Chloe anymore after what she'd done to our family. She spent most nights crying in our bedroom while I lay awake planning every possible way to protect Finn. I made lists of lawyers, therapists, and security measures we might need going forward. Sometimes I heard her walking the halls at 3 a.m, probably unable to sleep either. Nathan spent the next week gathering evidence for the protective order hearing and custody arrangements. He subpoenaed Finn's school records from the past 6 months to look for behavioral changes. The records showed a clear pattern starting in January when Timothy's visits began. Finn's teacher had noted increased anxiety during story time and more secretive behavior with classmates. There were 3 incidents where Finn wouldn't participate in group reading activities anymore. His grades had actually improved in reading, but his social interactions had gotten noticeably worse. The school counselor had even flagged him for possible evaluation back in March. These records would be crucial evidence showing how Timothy's presence had affected Finn's development. Nathan said the timeline matched perfectly with when Chloe admitted the visits started happening. The next morning, Chloe's parents called while I was making Finn breakfast and started yelling about how I was destroying our family. Her mother kept saying Timothy had paid his debt to society and deserved another chance with his nephew. I listened to them defend a convicted child predator for about 30 seconds before hanging up and blocking their numbers. 2 days later, I took Finn to his second appointment with Annika at her office downtown. She had toys and books scattered around to make kids feel comfortable, and Finn went right to the Legos while she asked him gentle questions. After about 40 minutes, she asked him about secrets and special friends, and that's when Finn mentioned something that made my blood run cold. He said Uncle Tommy told him that special friends keep special secrets and don't tell their parents everything. Annika kept her face neutral, but I saw her writing notes quickly on her clipboard. She documented this as textbook grooming behavior and said she'd be updating her report for the court immediately. That afternoon, I called Travis and told him I needed to take family medical leave to handle everything that was happening. He approved it right away, but we both knew this was going to hurt my career badly since I'd been up for senior manager next quarter. The forensics team Nathan hired came to the house that weekend to check our computers and devices. They found something on my laptop that made me sick to my stomach. Timothy had been using Chloe's login to research our family calendar, looking at my travel schedule and Finn's school events for months before the visit started. The detective showed me screenshots of searches for our address, Finn's school schedule, and even articles about working with special needs children. He'd been planning this whole thing since before he got out of prison. Valerie came by the following week to give us her final report from the CPS investigation. She sat at our kitchen table and went through her findings page by page while Chloe cried quietly in the corner. The investigation found no evidence of physical abuse, which was a huge relief, but she'd substantiated emotional abuse and child endangerment charges. Her recommendation was supervised visits only for Chloe at a family center and absolutely no contact between Timothy and Finn ever again. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the next Monday at the county courthouse. Nathan had prepared a thick folder of evidence, including Annika's reports about the grooming behaviors, the computer forensics showing Timothy's months of planning and statements from Finn's teacher about his behavioral changes. Chloe had hired her own lawyer, who kept arguing that she'd made a mistake, but loved her son and deserved another chance. The judge, an older woman with gray hair pulled back tight, spent over an hour reviewing everything while we all sat there waiting. She asked a few questions about the timeline and looked at the photos of the basement reading corner that I'd taken. Finally, she made her ruling. She granted the protective order against Timothy with no contact allowed for 5 years and ordered Chloe to move out of our house immediately. Chloe would have to complete parenting classes and individual therapy before she could have unsupervised visits with Finn. For now, she'd get supervised visits twice a week at the county family center for 2 hours each time. That night, I helped Chloe pack her clothes and personal items into boxes while she sobbed about losing everything. She kept saying she never meant for any of this to happen and that she just wanted to help her brother. I couldn't feel any sympathy for her when I thought about how she'd put our son in danger and lied to me for months. She loaded everything into her car and drove to her parents' house, the same parents who still insisted Timothy was innocent, and I was the real problem. Over the next few days, Finn kept asking where Mommy went and why she couldn't stay with us anymore. I tried to explain in simple terms that Mommy needed to go stay somewhere else for a while because she'd made some bad choices about keeping him safe. He'd ask about Uncle Tommy, too, wondering if he was coming back to read stories. I just told him Uncle Tommy had to go away and wouldn't be visiting anymore. I made sure to tell him over and over that none of this was his fault and that both Mommy and Daddy loved him very much. 3 weeks later, Craig called with news about Timothy's parole violation hearing. The parole board had reviewed all the evidence, including the protective order and Annika's documentation of grooming behaviors. They decided to send Timothy back to prison to finish his original sentence, plus an additional 18 months for the violations. Craig said with the new charges, Timothy wouldn't be eligible for any kind of early release for at least 3 more years. When I hung up the phone, I felt the first real sense of relief since finding that reading log in Finn's backpack. The next morning, I started looking for a nanny to help with Finn while I worked from home, calling agencies and checking references for hours. I interviewed 6 different candidates over the next week, running background checks on each one and calling every single reference they gave me. The woman I finally hired was a retired kindergarten teacher named Mrs. Peterson, who had 30 years of experience and passed every screening I could think of. The extra $800 a month hit our budget hard, especially with the lawyer fees piling up. But I needed someone trustworthy watching Finn when I had conference calls. 2 weeks later was Chloe's first supervised visit at the county family center, a bland building with security cameras in every corner and social workers watching through glass windows. I dropped Finn off in the lobby where the supervisor, a tired-looking woman with a clipboard, led him to the visiting room where Chloe was already waiting. When I picked him up 2 hours later, Finn looked confused and kept asking why Mommy was crying so much during their visit. The supervisor pulled me aside and explained that Chloe had spent most of the time sobbing and telling Finn how much she missed him, instead of actually playing with him or reading books. We had to remind her 3 times to focus on the child's needs, she said while making notes on her clipboard. That same week, Nathan filed the divorce papers after I told him about Chloe still insisting she'd done nothing wrong and that I was overreacting about Timothy. She hired her own lawyer within days and contested everything, sending messages through Nathan about wanting to work things out and go to couples counseling. I couldn't even look at those messages without feeling sick, remembering how she'd let a convicted predator into our basement with our son. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Finn went to therapy with Annika at her office filled with toys and art supplies. After the 4th session, Annika showed me drawings Finn had made about good secrets and bad secrets, and explained how she was teaching him about body safety and boundaries. "He's learning that adults should never ask children to keep secrets from their parents," she told me while Finn played with blocks in the corner. One afternoon, while Finn was at the school, I went through our filing cabinet looking for tax documents when I found a receipt from a hardware store dated 3 months ago for key copying. My hands started shaking when I realized what this meant, and I tore through the house, checking every drawer and cabinet until I found it in Chloe's jewelry box, a spare house key with a tag that said T in her handwriting. She'd given Timothy his own key to our house and never told me, letting him come and go whenever he wanted while I was traveling for work. I took photos of everything and sent them to Nathan immediately, adding this to our growing pile of evidence about Chloe's terrible judgment. The supervised visits continued twice a week for 3 months, while Chloe attended her court-ordered parenting classes every Saturday morning. Finally, in late spring, the family court judge reviewed her completion certificates and therapy reports and approved unsupervised day visits with Finn every other weekend. I bought a GPS tracking device that looked like a regular watch and put it on Finn's wrist, downloading the app to my phone so I could see where he was every second during those visits. My work was suffering badly from all the stress and constant appointments with lawyers and therapists and court dates. I missed 3 important client presentations and forgot to submit a quarterly report that cost us a major account. Travis called me into his office on a Friday afternoon and sat me down across from his desk, covered in performance reviews. "Dave, I know you're going through hell right now," he said, sliding a paper across to me, "but we need to talk about your future here." The paper showed I'd lost the promotion I'd been working toward for 2 years, the one that would have meant a $40,000 raise and better benefits. "I think you should consider the operations coordinator position instead," Travis suggested. "No travel, regular hours, less pressure." The pay cut would be $15,000 less than what I made now, but I signed the transfer paperwork anyway because Finn needed me home. 4 months into the new custody arrangement, Finn came back from a weekend with Chloe chattering about a letter Mommy had shown him. "Uncle Tommy wrote me from where he's staying now," Finn said while I helped him unpack his overnight bag. "Mommy said he's sorry he can't visit anymore." My whole body went cold as I calmly asked Finn to tell me more about the letter while I recorded him on my phone for evidence. Within an hour, I'd called both Nathan and Valerie to report this violation of the protective order, sending them the recording and explaining how Chloe had exposed Finn to contact from Timothy despite the court's explicit ban. The next court hearing happened 2 weeks later in the same courtroom where we'd gotten the protective order months earlier. The judge, the same gray-haired woman from before, looked exhausted as she reviewed the evidence about the letter incident. Chloe's lawyer argued she was just trying to give Finn closure and help him understand why his uncle disappeared, but the judge cut him off with a sharp wave of her hand. "Miss Thompson, you were explicitly ordered to have no contact between your son and Timothy Walker, including letters, phone calls, or any form of communication," she said sternly. "This is a clear violation of that order." She restricted Chloe back to supervised visits only, this time for a minimum of 6 months before another review. Chloe started crying in the courtroom, but the judge had already moved on to the next case. That weekend, I searched online for support groups and found one that met Thursday nights at a community center downtown. Walking into that first meeting felt strange, seeing 8 other parents sitting in a circle of metal folding chairs, looking just as tired and broken as I felt. The group leader, a tired-looking woman with short gray hair, handed me a styrofoam cup of coffee and pointed to an empty chair. I sat down and listened to a dad talk about his ex bringing her new boyfriend around their daughter without telling him first. Another mom shared how her in-laws kept undermining her custody arrangement by picking up her son from the school without permission. When my turn came, I kept it simple and just said I was dealing with safety concerns during my divorce. The next morning, Nathan called me while I was making Finn breakfast. He told me Chloe's parents had filed papers asking for grandparent rights, claiming I was keeping them from seeing Finn because of their support for Timothy. I dropped the spatula I was holding and had to sit down. Nathan said he'd already started drafting our response, explaining how their continued defense of Timothy and insistence he was innocent made them unsafe for unsupervised visits. He filed everything that afternoon while I picked Finn up from the school. 6 months had passed since that terrible day I found the reading log, and Finn had settled into our new routine pretty well. He went to therapy every Tuesday with Annika, who told me he'd stopped asking about Uncle Tommy completely and was understanding that some adults weren't safe even if they seemed nice. His nightmares had stopped and he wasn't having accidents at the school anymore. The divorce papers came through on a rainy Thursday morning while Finn was at the school. I signed for them and sat at the kitchen table reading through everything. Full custody for me, supervised visits for Chloe that could become unsupervised after a year if she followed all the court's rules. She had to pay $300 a month in child support from her part-time job at the grocery store. Travis called me into his office that same week and offered me the operations coordinator position permanently. No more travel, regular 9 to 5 hours, and I could work from home twice a week. The salary was $15,000 less than my old job, but I signed the transfer papers immediately. Being home for Finn when he got off the school bus mattered more than the money. 3 weeks later, Nathan called about another petition from Chloe. She'd started dating someone new and wanted to introduce him to Finn during her supervised visits at the family center. Nathan had already filed our objection, arguing that she needed to show better judgment for at least a year before bringing new people around Finn. The judge agreed at the hearing, telling Chloe she needed to focus on rebuilding trust with her son before adding complications. A full year after everything started, Finn brought home his report card with all A's and B's. His reading scores had jumped 2 grade levels thanks to the tutor I'd hired and the time we spent reading together every night. Mrs. Biles wrote a note saying he was participating more in class and had made several new friends. He'd even joined the school chess club and was learning to play. The letter arrived on a Saturday while Finn was at a friend's birthday party. Chloe had written 3 pages in careful handwriting, finally admitting she'd put Finn in danger by letting Timothy around him. She wrote that her therapist had helped her understand how she'd chosen her brother over her son's safety and how wrong that was. She apologized for lying to me, for breaking my trust, and for all the pain she'd caused. I read it twice, then put it in the filing cabinet with all the other legal papers. It didn't fix anything, but at least she was finally taking some responsibility. Craig called me the following Monday with news about Timothy's parole hearing. The board had reviewed all the new charges from violating his parole conditions with Finn, and they'd denied his request for early release. He'd have to serve at least 3 more years before his next hearing. I hung up the phone and actually smiled for the first time in months. Valerie stopped by later that week to check on us and mentioned her friend Sarah, who worked at the library. She thought we might get along since Sarah understood complicated custody situations from her own divorce. I wasn't ready to date yet, but I took Sarah's number anyway. We started texting about book recommendations for Finn and eventually met for coffee while our kids were at the school. She had twin boys a year older than Finn and didn't push when I explained our situation. We took things slow, just meeting for coffee or lunch when the kids were at the school. After 2 months, Sarah met Finn at a school event where her boys were performing in the band. He liked that she knew about Pokemon and could name all the characters. The court review happened exactly 1 year after Chloe lost unsupervised visits. She'd followed every single rule, attended all her therapy sessions, completed another parenting class, and never missed a supervised visit. The judge reviewed everything and granted her unsupervised weekend visits starting the next month. Finn was excited when I told him, already making plans for what he wanted to do at Mommy's apartment. I helped him pack his overnight bag that first Friday, checking 3 times that he had everything he needed. When Chloe picked him up, we managed a polite conversation about his bedtime and his allergy medicine. I watched them drive away and spent the entire weekend checking my phone every hour, but Finn came back Sunday night happy and chattering about the movie they'd watched and the pancakes she'd made. The weekends kept getting easier, and by spring I started looking at houses near Finn's school because being in that basement every day made my skin crawl. The realtor showed us a smaller place with a big backyard, and Finn loved the tree fort the previous owners had built. We moved in June, and I donated all the basement furniture to charity without telling Finn where it came from. The new house had no basement at all, which felt perfect. Finn started 2nd grade at the same school, but now we could walk there in 5 minutes instead of driving 20. He wanted to try soccer after watching the World Cup with me, and I signed him up for the local rec league. The first practice was rough since he'd never played organized sports, but the coach was patient, and the other kids were beginners too. By October, he was scoring goals and making friends who only knew him as the kid who loved Pokemon cards. Sarah and I had been dating for 6 months by then, and she came to his games with her twin boys who cheered louder than anyone. Finn started having sleepovers at his teammate Marcus's house, and I had to learn to let him go, even though my chest got tight every time. The custody schedule settled into a rhythm with Chloe getting him every other weekend and 1 weeknight for dinner. We managed pick-up and drop-off without fighting, though we barely spoke beyond logistics. 2 years after that doorbell rang, we both showed up for his 3rd grade play where he played a talking tree. We sat on opposite sides of the auditorium, but we both took pictures and even nodded at each other when Finn forgot his line and made everyone laugh. Sarah and I got engaged that Christmas, and Finn practically bounced off the walls when I asked him to be my ring bearer. He took the job seriously and practiced walking slowly while carrying the pillow at least 50 times in our living room. The wedding was small with just family and close friends, but Finn stole the show telling everyone how he'd kept the ring safe. Chloe sent a card wishing us well, which surprised me, but I appreciated the gesture. She started dating someone the following year and had Nathan run a full background check before introducing him to Finn. The guy was an accountant with no record and seemed genuinely nice when I met him at Finn's 4th grade science fair. They got married 2 years later, and Finn adjusted well to having another adult in his life who cared about him. Middle school started, and Finn joined the robotics club where his reading had improved, so much he could follow all the technical manuals. His English teacher assigned an essay about overcoming challenges, and Finn wrote about learning to trust adults again after someone had broken that trust. He didn't name Timothy, but he wrote about how his dad had protected him and taught him about boundaries. The teacher submitted it to a district competition, and Finn won 2nd place. At the award ceremony, he thanked me in his speech for always keeping him safe, and I had to bite my lip hard to keep from crying in front of everyone. Craig called me the next morning, which was weird since I hadn't heard from him in over a year. Timothy had died in prison from a massive heart attack during the night, and they wanted to notify the victims' families. I thanked him for calling and hung up, feeling nothing but relief that this chapter was finally completely closed. I told Finn that afternoon using simple terms, and he just nodded and asked if we could get pizza for dinner. 5 years had passed since I'd found that reading log, and everything had changed completely. Finn was 13 now and taller than my shoulder, with a deep voice that still surprised me sometimes. He had good friends and good grades and could talk to me about anything without fear or secrets. Sarah and I had a daughter who was 2, and Finn was the best big brother, always reading to her and making her laugh. We'd survived something that could have destroyed us and came out stronger on the other side. The old house with its basement was someone else's problem now, and we had a life filled with soccer games and robotics competitions and normal teenage problems like forgotten homework and messy rooms. Finn still saw Annika once a month just to check in, but mostly they talked about regular kid stuff now instead of trauma and boundaries. Chloe and I would never be friends, but we could sit together at his 8th grade graduation and both cheer when his name was called. Her husband turned out to be a decent guy who understood boundaries and never pushed for more involvement than Finn was comfortable with. The reading log that started everything was tucked away in a filing cabinet with all the other legal documents from that time. Sometimes I thought about burning it all, but decided to keep it as proof that we'd faced the worst and won. Finn was happy and healthy and safe, and that was all that mattered in the end. That's how it all went down for me. Now I'm curious how you'd see it. Would you have done the same thing? Drop a comment below, I'll be reading through them. Your takes always add to the story.